Step into Sci-Fi codes where mystery meets imagination. Enjoy the journey, and don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 1, The Hunt begins. A thick mist blanketed the jungle, muffling all sound. Too silent. Zyra, the elite alien huntress, moved with caution, her sharp eyes scanning the dense terrain. Her armor, black as the void, blended seamlessly into the shadows, and the twin energy blades at her sides hummed softly. She had hunted countless creatures across the galaxy, but this mission was unlike any other. Her people believed that humans were nothing more than myths, a species long extinct. Stories painted them as cunning, dangerous, and nearly impossible to kill. They were the only species to have ever defied the galactic dominion, but that was centuries ago. No human had been seen in over 300 years. Yet, the Council had intercepted a distress beacon encoded in an ancient human frequency. If humans were gone, who had sent it? Zyra was tasked with finding out. And if, by some impossible chance, a human had survived, she would do what she did best: hunt. She stepped forward, her boots sinking into the damp earth. The air smelled of rain and decay, her visor mapping the surroundings in bright green outlines. Despite the technology at her disposal, something felt wrong. A chill ran down her spine. She was being watched. She turned sharply, scanning the treetops. Nothing. Then a rustle of leaves. Not the wind. Something or someone was here. Kneeling, she touched the ground. Fresh tracks. Humanoid. It couldn't be. A faint clicking noise reached her ears. Zyra barely had time to react before a sharp projectile shot past her, embedding itself into a tree with a solid thunk. A trap. Primitive, yet effective. Her eyes narrowed. Whoever set this knew how to stay hidden. Impressive. Come out, she commanded, voice sharp and cold. Face me. Silence. Then, movement. A figure stepped from the shadows, perching on a thick tree branch above her. Zyra's breath caught for just a moment. A man. A real, living human. He was tall, lean yet strong, clad in dark, tattered clothing. A makeshift mask of fabric and metal obscured most of his face, but his sharp, intelligent eyes studied her with unnerving precision. He held a crude spear, yet his stance spoke of experience. This was no frightened survivor. This was a warrior. Zyra tightened her grip on her weapons, her mind racing. Humans were extinct. Weren't they? The man tilted his head slightly, as if assessing her just as she was assessing him. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished into the jungle. Zyra cursed under her breath. This hunt had just become interesting. Chapter 2, The Phantom Fighter. The jungle was alive with whispers of the hunt. Zyra moved like a shadow, every step precise, every breath controlled. The human was real, not a myth, not a long-lost relic of war. Flesh and blood. And more importantly, dangerous. She had faced beasts with razor-sharp claws, creatures that could tear through metal. But none moved like him. He didn't just hide. He disappeared. The memory of their brief encounter replayed in her mind, his stance, his gaze, his measured retreat. He had assessed her like a predator, not prey. That alone made him unlike anything she had ever hunted. But Zyra was not one to be outmatched. She had trained her entire life, conquered planets, and stood undefeated. A mere human would not change that. Still, she had to be careful. He had the advantage here. This jungle was his battlefield. She activated her visor, switching to thermal vision. Heat signatures glowed red and orange against the darkness. Nothing. Impossible. Then the realization struck her. He knows how to hide from my technology. An unfamiliar sensation crept through her. Excitement. Zyra was used to predictable prey. Creatures relying on instinct rather than strategy. But this human was different. He was playing a game. A game she intended to win. Chapter 3, A Deadly Encounter. A sudden crackle of static in her ear broke her focus. Zyra, report. The voice of her superior, Commander Khan, was sharp. She hesitated, then answered. Mission compromised. There is a survivor. Silence. Repeat that. Jaw clenched, she confirmed, the human species is not extinct. I have engaged one. Another pause. Longer this time. Terminate immediately. The order was clear. Yet, something inside her resisted. She had never questioned a command before. Never hesitated. But now? Now she wanted to understand. Why was he here? How had he survived? What else had her people been wrong about? A sharp whistle cut through the air. Instinct screamed. She leaped back just in time. A thin spear sliced past her, embedding into a tree with a deep vibrating hum. She spun, weapons raised. The jungle was still. Then movement from the treetops. He dropped like a ghost, silent, precise. Zyra barely had time to react. He struck fast, not with brute force, but with precision. His fist connected with her ribs, knocking the air from her lungs. She twisted, countering, but he was already gone, rolling into the shadows. Teeth gritted, Zyra forced herself to remain calm. He was fast. Smarter than she had expected. But she was stronger. Then she saw the spear embedded in the tree. A distraction. Which meant, behind you. She spun just as he lunged. This time, she was ready. Their bodies collided in a violent clash. Zyra locked her arm around his, twisting. He countered, shifting his weight, using her own momentum against her. They tumbled, hitting the ground hard, rolling through dirt and leaves. For a moment, their faces were inches apart. His breath was steady. Controlled. His eyes held no fear. Predator's eyes. Zyra smirked. You're not afraid of me, are you? He didn't respond. Instead, he pushed off, flipping backward, landing smoothly on his feet. He studied her for a moment. Then he vanished into the jungle once more. Zyra lay there for a moment, staring at the canopy above. Then, for the first time in years, she laughed. This was going to be fun. Chapter 4, Shadows of the Past. The rain poured down in sheets, drenching the jungle. Lightning cracked through the sky, illuminating the canopy for mere seconds before plunging it into darkness again. Zyra crouched beneath the cover of a massive root system, her muscles tense. The hunt had escalated. She was no longer simply tracking the human, she was trying to outmaneuver him. She touched the communicator at her ear. Commander Khan, the human is more skilled than anticipated. Requesting further. Static. No response. A frown creased her brow. She tapped the device again. Nothing. The storm must have disrupted the signal. For the first time in her career, Zyra realized she was completely alone. She exhaled slowly, steadying her thoughts. This changed nothing. The mission remained the same. A flicker of movement caught her eye. There, through the sheets of rain, a silhouette moved swiftly between the trees. Zyra's instincts kicked in. She leaped into action, sprinting after him. The mud sucked at her boots, branches slashed at her arms, but she barely felt them. The human was fast, but she was relentless. A fallen log blocked her path. Without hesitation, she vaulted over it only to land directly into a trap. The ground beneath her feet caved. Too late. She fell, landing hard in a deep pit, the damp earth swallowing her impact. The moment she hit the bottom, she spun, blades drawn, prepared for an attack. But none came. Instead, a shadow loomed over the edge of the pit. The human. He stood above her, peering down with those sharp, unreadable eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rain dripped from his mask, his posture relaxed yet alert. Zyra narrowed her eyes. Clever. He didn't reply. Instead, he tossed something into the pit, a length of thick vine, knotted at intervals. A rope. Zyra stared at it. Then back at him. You're letting me go? Still, he remained silent. Suspicion warred with curiosity, but she took the rope. Hauling herself out, she landed beside him. He stepped back, giving her space. A show of trust? Or calculation? Why, she demanded. You could have left me. The human finally spoke, his voice low, steady. You're not the real enemy. Before she could press for more, he turned and disappeared into the jungle once again. Zyra remained still, rain dripping from her armor. Not the real enemy. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Chapter 5, Revelations. The storm had passed, but the jungle remained shrouded in mist. Zyra pressed forward, her thoughts clouded. She had always followed orders without question. Kill the target. Complete the mission. But now, with the human's words echoing in her mind, she felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. Her visor picked up traces of heat ahead. A small cave, nestled in the rocks. She approached cautiously, stepping inside. The interior was dimly lit by a cluster of glowing fungi. Then she saw it. Scattered across the floor were remnants of technology. Ancient, human-made. Rusted weapons, shattered screens displaying faded maps of alien constellations, and a tattered banner with a symbol she vaguely recognized, one of Earth's last resistance factions. This wasn't just a hiding place. This was a remnant of a lost war. A metallic clink echoed behind her. She whirled, blades ready. Only to find the human standing at the entrance, his gaze locked onto hers. Now you understand, he said. We never died. We never stopped fighting. Her grip tightened on her weapons. You're saying, there are more of you? A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. You'll see soon enough. Zyra's heart pounded. Everything she had been taught was a lie. Chapter 6, An Unlikely Alliance. Zyra paced the cave, her boots scraping against the stone floor. The wall seemed to close in on her, the darkness pressing in, thick with questions and doubt. Her mind raced, spinning around the impossible reality she now faced. She had spent her entire life believing that humanity had been eradicated, that they were no more than a footnote in history. Yet here stood a survivor, a warrior, who claimed that humans never ceased to exist, and that they had simply learned to survive in the shadows. Zyra stopped mid-stride, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the man before her. The harsh light from the small fire flickered between them, casting long shadows across his worn face. His eyes were steadfast, unyielding, and they locked onto hers without flinching. He was a warrior, no question about it. The scars on his skin, the hardened set of his jaw, they spoke of a life lived in constant battle. If there are more of you, she said, her voice sharp as a blade, why remain hidden? Why not strike back? She couldn't understand it. Why had they chosen to stay in the dark, running and hiding like prey, when they had the chance to rise up? The human exhaled, a deep, almost resigned sigh, before stepping forward. His movements were measured, deliberate, as though each step he took carried the weight of 1,000 decisions. Because we know what happens when we expose ourselves, he replied, his voice steady. Your people hunt us. Wipe us out. We've survived this long by staying in the shadows. But that's about to change. Zyra felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected, admiration. For a moment, she saw in him something she recognized. A fight. A relentless will to survive. But beneath that, there was also something else, fear. Fear of what would happen if the shadows were to fall, if the hunters were to come after them once more. She crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. What do you mean? Her voice was a low growl, a challenge in her tone. Whatever this human was trying to tell her, she needed answers. He reached into his pack, his movements calm, practiced. He pulled out a small device, old, but still operational. A transmitter. It seemed out of place in the rugged surroundings, its metal edges glinting in the firelight. Zyra's breath caught in her throat, her pulse quickening as she realized what it was. She had seen such devices before, had intercepted them during her missions. They were used for one thing and one thing only: communication. He held it out to her, and without a word, handed it over. Zyra's fingers brushed the cold metal as she took the device from him. It was heavy in her hand, far heavier than its small size suggested. She examined it for a moment, her eyes scanning the intricate design. Then, without warning, her gaze shot up to meet his. "That distress signal your people picked up," she said slowly, as if piecing together a puzzle. "It wasn't an accident. We sent it. We wanted you to find us." Zyra stiffened, her heart skipping a beat. She had always believed the signal was a trap, a fluke, something too convenient to be true. But now, standing here with the evidence in her hand, she realized the truth was far more complicated. She felt a chill race down her spine. Her fingers tightened around the transmitter, and she took a step back, suddenly unsure of herself. "Why?" she demanded, her voice quieter now, edged with suspicion. "Why send us the signal? Why reveal yourselves to us if you've been hiding for so long?" It made no sense. If they had survived by staying hidden, why risk everything by drawing attention to themselves? The human didn't falter. His gaze remained locked on hers, unwavering, and for a moment, Zyra felt as though he was looking right through her, into the very core of her being. "Because we need you," he said simply. The words hit her like a physical blow. Need her? The idea was almost laughable. She, a soldier of the Empire, a trained killer, was supposed to be the one giving orders, the one hunting them down. But instead, here she was, standing in the presence of a man who had been brought to the brink of extinction, asking for her help. Zyra's breath hitched, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly uncertain. Her mission, the one she had spent years training for, was supposed to be clear-cut. Hunt the humans. Destroy them. Eradicate any trace of their existence. It was simple. Clean. No questions, no hesitation. But this? This was a complication she hadn't anticipated. The lines between enemy and ally H. Chapter 7, The Final Choice. The night was eerily quiet. The jungle, once alive with the hum of insects and rustling foliage, now seemed to hold its breath. Zyra sat at the cave's entrance, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the first hints of dawn threatened to break. The sky was painted in shades of deep purple and fiery orange, but to her, it felt like a distant reminder of a life she no longer knew. She was out of time. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of the decision that had been gnawing at her since she'd arrived. Zyra had always known her place in the war. Trained from childhood to serve the Empire, raised to believe that duty was the highest calling, she had never questioned the mission until now. The moment of truth had arrived. And it felt like the world had stopped spinning, leaving her frozen in its grasp. Her communicator crackled to life, a harsh static slicing through the heavy silence. Then, a voice, Commander Khan. Cold. Detached. Expectant. Agent Zyra, report. Zyra's body tensed, her fingers twitching near the weapons at her side. It was a reflex, honed over years of training. But this time, it felt different. This time, the tension was not just physical, it was something deeper, a pulling in her chest that made it harder to breathe. She inhaled sharply, her hand tightening around the transmitter she had kept hidden in her palm. The human had given it to her, told her it was their only chance. That had been days ago. The decision was now hers. I found him, she replied, her voice carefully neutral, her heart hammering in her chest. And? Khan's voice crackled through the speaker again, sharp and unyielding. His impatience bled through the static. Zyra's breath hitched. She could feel the human's eyes on her, the weight of his gaze pressing against her like an unseen force. He stood beside her, still as stone, the calm in his posture an enigma. No fear, no desperation. Only a quiet strength that made Zyra question everything she had been taught. Her fingers curled around the device. Do it, Zyra. Complete the mission. Eliminate the threat. That's what you've been trained for. The words echoed in her mind like a mantra. But they felt hollow now, empty. She could still hear the commander's voice in her ears, commanding, ordering her to do what had always been expected. But something had changed. Something inside of her had shifted, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't bring herself to obey. The human didn't flinch. He didn't even move. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. He trusted her. He had put his faith in her when she had no reason to return it. The words echoed in her mind like a mantra. But they felt hollow now, empty. She could still hear the commander's voice in her ears, commanding, ordering her to do what had always been expected. But something had changed. Something inside of her had shifted, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't bring herself to obey. The human didn't flinch. He didn't even move. His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. He trusted her. He had put his faith in her when she had no reason to return it. Zyra hesitated. For the first time in her life, she hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the jungle, the trees standing tall and silent as if they, too, were holding their breath. The creatures of the night had quieted, the rustling leaves no longer signaling movement. She realized that the world around her had changed. The war she had been fighting, the war she thought she understood, was a lie. It had always been a lie. She was no longer the person she had once been, the obedient soldier, the unquestioning agent of her people's will. Her fingers tightened over the transmitter. She could feel the weight of the decision in her bones, the gravity of it anchoring her to the moment. And then, slowly, she raised her eyes to the sky. The first rays of dawn kissed the horizon, a promise of something new, something unknown. This is it. This is the choice. Mission compromised, she said at last, her voice breaking the stillness. The human escaped. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. The air seemed to hold its breath again, and Zyra's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She waited, her fingers still clenching the transmitter, her body tense, waiting for the wrath she knew would follow. Finally, the response came. Cold. Unfeeling. Understood. Return to base immediately. The communicator clicked off, its finality ringing in her ears. Zyra exhaled sharply, as though releasing a breath she hadn't known she had been holding. She glanced at the human, who stood still, watching her with those calm, piercing eyes. He hadn't moved. He hadn't reacted. And for some reason, that steadiness made the decision she had just made feel more real, more permanent. She turned fully to face him, her heart a chaotic storm of emotions, fear, relief, uncertainty. But most of all, freedom. We have work to do, she said, her voice firm, even as it trembled beneath the surface. The human nodded, no words needed. He reached out, extending a hand toward her, and for the first time, Zyra didn't hesitate. She took it, her fingers brushing against his, the touch grounding her in this new reality. The dawn stretched higher, the light breaking through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. It was a new day. A new path. And Zyra knew that the real battle was just beginning. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew she couldn't walk it alone. For the first time in her life, she was free.